back to this story now that we saw beginning to emerge earlier this morning. ActionSA issuing a statement saying that the DA has abandoned its mayor in Johannesburg, Dr. Mpho Phalatse, and the residents of the metro. Mayor Phalatse is facing 3 motions of no confidence on Thursday when the Johannesburg Council convenes. ActionSA says the DA has intentionally collapsed negotiations to restore the governing multi-party coalition in the metro. An accusation, of course, the DA vehemently denies, and saying they've acted in good faith throughout all these negotiations. In fact, they are saying that that statement could have been premature because a new deal apparently had been put at the feet of ActionSA. Well, let's hear more from the chairperson of ActionSA now, Michael Beaumont, who's joining us. Michael, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Dr. Mpho Phalatse is facing 3 motions of no confidence, but the 2 biggest partners in this multi-party coalition are seemingly bickering.
Well, Thabo, I think the point is we've been facing these motions of no confidence since October, when the multi-party coalition government lost its majority, when the Patriotic Alliance left the coalition. And I think from an ActionSA standpoint, along with actually many of our other coalition partners, there's been a great deal of frustration with what is perceived to be a lack of urgency and a degree of delay and obstruction on the part of the Democratic Alliance to do what is necessary to restore the majority in this coalition. You cannot govern in South Africa with the minority coalition, certainly not when your opponents are hell-bent on bringing motions of no confidence. And we have this very strange dynamic right now, Thabo, where you've got political parties in the coalition who are working much harder than the DA to protect a DA mayor from motions of no confidence.
Explain that dynamic to me. I mean, in your statement, that it repeatedly says, we urged, we repeatedly asked. It seems as if all the other parties are there just consistently begging the DA to, I suppose, side with you. Is that the dynamic that's currently going on?
Yes, certainly. So I think on 2 occasions at the end of last year, it took all the coalition partners to call the DA in and say we have to negotiate to bring the PA back into the coalition. It's not about the PA being a preferred option. It's mathematically a required option to return to a majority and to keep the ANC out in Johannesburg. And eventually the DA relented in that regard. And then, of course, when you had the negotiations this week, again, the DA adopting positions that were collapsing coalition talks, political parties had to urge the DA, writing to the DA, as recently as yesterday, saying, please reconsider your position. So certainly it is a case of political parties in the coalition petitioning the DA to be more reasonable.
Yeah, so it's not a coalition of equals, would you say? Well, generally it's not, because you all didn't get equal votes. But I suppose you want it to be a multi-party coalition that considers all views equally.
Well, certainly. I mean, let's be frank. This is a multi-party coalition that needs 7 seats to defeat motions of no confidence tomorrow. So if you ever would like to understand the importance of a smaller party that can constitute those 7 seats or add to them, certainly every party is very important in a multi-party coalition, and it needs to be done that way. We do have to operate by consensus in our decision-making, and that has been part of the challenge. But it does mean political parties have to share certain values. And in this case, one of those values has to be strong, stable coalition government that can ensure we keep the ANC out.
Okay, let's talk now what the deal is, essentially where you were and where you are right now. Because the Democratic Alliance, I seen one on an article, Helen Ziller has said they've made substantial compromises throughout these negotiations. In fact, as early as today, they've updated their offer, a further compromise, which they are saying you did not consider before issuing your statement this morning. What were the reasons initially that were given to you for rejecting the deal that you said you've put together, which the Patriotic Alliance had accepted?
Yeah, and I think that's the point to start there, Thabo. We had a deal that all political parties, including the DA, accepted at the time, and the Patriotic Alliance had resolved to accept as well, that the DA ended up rejecting. They've written a letter to the coalition in which they state their reasons to be that they are concerned the Patriotic Alliance is bringing the politics of patronage and corruption into the position of economic development. But we fundamentally believe that that argument is a false pretense. Because if there's evidence of a political party wishing to behave in those ways, we need to bring that evidence to the table, and then we wouldn't want such a party in the coalition in any position. But here you have the Democratic Alliance saying, let's have them in the Department of Roads and Transport with a 5 billion rand budget, but, we can't have them in the Department of Economic Development with a 600 million rand budget. It just doesn't make sense.
So you are saying those reasons are false, which you have stated now. They are saying they could be bringing patronage into this particular portfolio, and you're saying they are false because they've already been given the roads and transport. So what is the real reason then why the Democratic Alliance doesn't want the Patriotic Alliance?
All I can do is comment from what I see as a coalition partner involved in these negotiations. And what I see is a political party that had to be dragged to the negotiating table. When they came to the negotiating table, an offer was accepted and then rejected in bad faith, and subsequent proposals get pulled together in such a way where it's not convincing that the objective actually is a majority government that can defeat these motions of no confidence tomorrow. So from my point of view, we are looking for signs that the Democratic Alliance is going to live up to its stated commitment to keep the ANC out, but that evidence has not been visible to us as a coalition partner over the course of the last few weeks.
Yeah. Is it a stated position of the Democratic Alliance to say, for example, in the multi-party coalition, parties who would get positions like MMC would need to have met a particular minimum threshold of the electoral vote, and therefore the Patriotic Alliance does not fit that particular criteria?
No, I don't think so at all. The Patriotic Alliance in Johannesburg has 7 seats. And we have political parties currently represented in our mayoral committee with less than 7 seats. So it really isn't the case that you can simply divvy things up in that kind of fashion. In fact, and rather than making it about, who gets what and the kind of positional politics that has plagued coalition for too long, let's understand that coalition politics has to see the representation of various diverse communities in government. And that means the more parties that are represented in the executive committee, the better that service delivery agenda will cover all residents in the city of Johannesburg.
Yeah. So does the Democratic Alliance just generally, in your view, as a part of this multi-party coalition, not trust the Patriotic Alliance? We know they are the ones, by the way, in the previous motion who voted against Dr. Mpho Phalatse.
Certainly that is what has been said. I must say that I think trust is a very considerable word in politics. I'm not sure we trust the Democratic Alliance, quite frankly. But I think the more important point is we have to trust in each other in as much as it is to keep a stable government that serves the residents and keeps the ANC out. That has to be a baseline expectation that even if we don't trust each other in other regards, we can trust each other in that one.
Here's a critique that some have advanced towards ActionSA, saying ActionSA has sided with those like Patriotic Alliance who would try extort greater political power from a position of relatively less political support. How do you respond to that?
I don't think it's the case at all that we side with one party or another. We side with the residents of Johannesburg. And if there was a different political party that held the seats that were required to stabilize this coalition and to keep the ANC out, we would be siding with that party. It's not about siding with one party or another or allowing a party to be extortive in their approach. But the reality is that we need to restore this majority so that we can govern. To give you an example, Thabo, the service delivery budgets in Johannesburg have had to be cut down by 2 billion rand at the end of last year because loan agreements could not be passed without a majority. That's things that impact service delivery in communities. And that's why it's so important that we find that pathway to a majority. And in this case, if that's the Patriotic Alliance, absolutely ActionSA will pursue that majority for the residents.
Yeah. Well, one could argue, judging by what happened in October and how the Patriotic Alliance voted, that they certainly are seemingly not honoring that value, that commitment to keeping the ANC out of power.
Sure. So the Patriotic Alliance has a different view on coalitions to ActionSA, for example. And you will know that in the country, in various places, they coalesce on the one side with the ANC and on the other side with groupings of party more aligned with ActionSA. So they have a slightly different perspective on these things. But I think the point is in local government, you can find a common service delivery agenda. You can recognize a party like the Patriotic Alliance has a constituency. That constituency is underserviced. and you can work together to pull together a service delivery agenda that gives expression to that political party's constituency. And I think that's the secret to stable coalition government.
Okay. In your statement, you say ActionSA is now openly part of a group of parties within the coalition that is working to see if an alternate coalition can be convened that honors the commitment to keep the ANC out of government should the DA elect not to do so. Here's a question for you. Are you still interested in a multi-party arrangement or multi-party coalition arrangement that involves the Democratic Alliance?
Absolutely, and we've communicated to our coalition partners, as we did in that statement, that we will be going to council tomorrow and to vote against these motions of no confidence in defense of Mayor Mpho Phalatse. In fact, if anything, I would venture that it is ActionSA that is working hardest for this particular arrangement to succeed. However, the point that we have to consider is that if the Democratic Alliance does not honor that obligation itself, what do we do as an organization? Do we simply let the ANC return to Johannesburg, or do we look around within our coalition and identify political parties who will stand with us to ensure that that does not happen? Bottom line, Thabo, is if the DA does not decide to lead in the situation, someone else has to step forward and do it, and we are willing to if necessary.
So in simple terms, you'll form another coalition. With who?
Certainly. So we could form a coalition with a number of political parties and petition the DA to support that coalition over the ANC, by way of example.
So you of course, have asked and did some studies and asked your people whether or not they would want you to be in a coalition with the EFF, for example. Is that one of your considerations?
No, it isn't at this stage. I think we must be clear that the ANC and EFF have done a deal in Gauteng, where the EFF will support the ANC into government in Johannesburg in return for the ANC supporting the EFF into government in Ekurhuleni. That is an arrangement that we cannot be a part of, and the people of South Africa have responded to our public engagements on this issue and been very clear who they would like us to side with, and it's not with the EFF and the ANC, and we will honor that response.
All right. Let's look at the updated offer. Have you had a look at it? Does it change your mind at all?
The updated
offer from the Democratic Alliance?
Certainly. It has been provided. It is currently part of a discussion that is taking place. As to whether it will succeed or not, we remain to see. We've indicated to our coalition partners that we will form part of all discussions throughout the day and night ahead of tomorrow because we want this arrangement to work. I think our principal criticism in that statement is that this thing has been left to the last minute and there's been a lack of urgency in the way that it's carried out. This council meeting is taking place tomorrow morning, and you can imagine we're sitting here at 8:30 the night before, and we cannot right now tell the residents of Johannesburg that we can defeat that motion. That's not acceptable to ActionSA.
Yeah. Does the new updated offer include giving those two MMC positions to the Patriotic Alliance?
I think, Thabo, if you don't mind, there's currently a negotiation underway. I think it would probably harm those negotiations for me to talk about the details of that. But certainly, if these negotiations succeed, the coalition would want to communicate the terms of that agreement publicly and in a transparent and responsible manner.
Sure. I give you that. I was just trying. See, maybe you could probably give me an answer there. But what we did speak to, though, with the minority parties was that they are seemingly assured of the support of the Patriotic Alliance.
Well, I mean, I can't speak to that. What I can tell you is that the arrangements that the ANC have tried to pull together in Johannesburg are not happy. There's a lot of political parties in that particular bloc who feel that the way it's been done has excluded them or that the interests favor one or the other. And typically speaking, when coalitions are pulled together on the grounds of corruption and malfeasance, that's exactly what happens. You need to come together on the grounds of values and common service delivery agenda, and that is something that allows political parties to work together, even if you disagree. But you have that commonality. I'm not sure that is the case on the other side of the aisle here. Yeah.
So as of now, where you're sitting, do you have a degree of certainty whether you will be able to conquer this motion of no confidence?
We don't. And in fact, that's why we communicated the way we did this morning, because we cannot afford to have the residents of Johannesburg caught unaware about the situation, or that if these motions succeed tomorrow, there hasn't been communication about the situation we find ourselves in. I imagine greater clarity will arise during the course of the evening and in the early hours of the morning. But as indicated, we remain available and committed to be part of those discussions in the best interest of making this work.
Yeah. As far as ActionSA is concerned, if this motion is successful tomorrow, it's then therefore a given that the DA-led multi-party coalition will be out of the city of Johannesburg and possibly the Ekurhuleni Metro.
Certainly, when a motion of no confidence like this succeeds, the mayor is removed from office, as well as all the office bearers in the executive. It effectively brings a coalition government to an end. However, I think it's very important to point out here, Thabo, that while there's a motion to remove the mayor that we will defend against, at the end of the day, there then has to be an election for another mayor. And if it is necessary for ActionSA to work with other political parties in that environment so that there's leadership behind the idea of successful coalition, that is something we will have to consider.
So what does that mean? Will you be putting up a candidate from ActionSA for the position of mayor?
Certainly. So if a motion of no confidence does succeed against our wishes, then we will canvass our coalition partners and we would request their support for an ActionSA candidate. And certainly that is something we would pursue because we have to come to terms with something that there has to be leadership. And if the party currently providing leadership fails to do so, we're going to have to step up and do exactly that.
What are you learning from all this in how these coalitions should be handled going forward?
You know, a number of things, Thabo. I think one of the most important points we are seeing more and more, that the best forms of coalition are managed locally. I think in many ways when these political parties tussle with issues at a national level, they are further removed from the realities of service delivery and on the agenda. And I can tell you right now, if many of the challenges like this one had been left to the local representatives of our coalition, it would have been solved a long time ago. Because those are the representatives of the people who elected them. They are closest to the mandates that they have received. And they know the service delivery challenges that have to be overcome in this municipality. And it is my understanding that all of those representatives, too, are saying, restore this majority, let's get back on track to govern, let's defeat these motions of no confidence.
ActionSA chairperson Michael Beaumont, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on tonight, wherever you are. That particular matter still being negotiated, and it does seem like will be negotiated all the way up until tomorrow morning, just before that council sitting. So at this point, it's still up in the air whether Dr. Mpho Phalatse will be able to conquer that motion of no confidence.